In December 1977, the activity around Janet became even more pronounced.
Oh, the main event, without any doubt, was that the day when Janet had her menarche for her first period. Our colleague, who was a student of physics, he was very interested in this idea of matter passing through matter, and he took this cushion into the bedroom, as I recall, and asked Janet to see if she could get it downstairs without opening the door, which would be very good evidence. The next thing we knew was that it was on the roof. Instead of going down through the floor, it went upwards, and the local baker was walking along the pavement towards the house and suddenly saw it. He said there was nobody leaning out of the window, nobody threw it. One minute it wasn't there, and the next minute it was.
According to eyewitness reports at the time, a large red cushion materialised out of thin air above the Hodgson house.
You're suddenly confronted with something like that. It's a terrific shock to the system. I mean, you know it can't have happened, but you know it did. And I got it down with great difficulty, I may say. I nearly fell out of the window. And there's just no way that I could have got that cushion onto the roof normally. And if I couldn't, I don't think a 12-year-old girl could either.
However, the day's strange events weren't over yet.
On the same day, a colleague of ours asked Janet deliberately if she could make something go through the floor to the room below. And the next thing we knew was that Janet claimed to have floated into the house next door through the wall, and she described the neighbour's bedroom, where she'd certainly never been, quite accurately, and said she'd left something behind in there. So we made arrangements when we could to go round, and sure enough there was a book belonging to Janet in the neighbour's bedroom.
I met Mrs. Nottingham from next door, and who I must say did talk about some pretty hair-raising things. Well, it sounded rather as if some book that ought to have been in the Hodgson house ended up in her house, and things came through the wall.
Oh, suitably enough, the book was called Fun and Games for Children, which was quite appropriate. But there's just no way at all that she could have got in there normally. The house was locked, the neighbour was out, and you couldn't get through the window, you couldn't even get up the chimney. We checked that, it became blocked off. And yet the book was found next door, so it had gone through the wall.
It does stretch credibility, doesn't it? You know, it sounds absolutely fantastic to think that a child can, dematerialise or go through a wall and deposit something and come back. We have to rely on the people that were there at the time. We can do nothing more than just take their word for it. But with the weight of everything else that was reported by other people, then it doesn't surprise me in the least that these sort of things were reported there.
Just when things seemed they couldn't get more bizarre, they did.
The levitation started off with the girls sort of just sliding out of bed, and then it got more and more impressive, and then we ended up with a sequence of pictures of them, what I'm told is levitating.
Do these pictures, taken remotely by photographer Graham Morris, actually show Janet levitating?
Pictures don't lie, let's put it that way. The pictures that you see actually happened. Whatever it was, happened. What caused it to happen, I'll leave everybody else to work that one out. I just know that when that camera went off, it photographed about 5 frames of a girl starting off, coming out of bed, and then ending up on the floor.
The increasing unpredictability of the apparent phenomena surrounding Janet raised some serious concerns for her well-being.
There have been incidents of levitation and bedclothes being pulled, and the investigators at the time were concerned about her safety.
The doctor came round and gave her a shot, and he said something like this would put a horse or an elephant out, and she's still fighting, and it ended up with about 2 or 3 of us trying to hold her down, and this was after the sedation.
Later on that night, she was found, 10-15 feet at the other end of the room, up on a dresser. That's quite a shocking thing in itself.
We were all downstairs, big bang, everyone rushes upstairs, her uncle goes in first, finds her on the radio, I walk in with the camera, bang. How did she get there? I'll leave that for all the others to try and work out.
In spite of the best efforts of the investigators and medical professionals, this apparent levitation continued.
She had that experience of levitation, which was witnessed from the street outside. Rather, as you saw in The Exorcist, her head didn't go around in circles, but the lollipop lady right across the road saw her floating around the room in mid-air, and it frightened the life out of her.
There were witnesses in the street that actually saw this. They looking up through the bedroom windows, and there's Janet floating past the window, at some height. Very, very difficult, I would imagine, for a child to fake.
We know from psychology research that there are problems with eyewitness account, and yet this might be the holy grail of eyewitness testimony, because you've got two independent witnesses, not aware of each other, providing a testimony that corroborates each other.
Well, Guy and Morris, I think, were convinced that a lot of things happened that I would not be convinced by. I mean, there were two people in the road, I think, who said they saw things from the road. Well, to my mind, you don't get a very good view of what goes on inside an upper bedroom window from the road.
While I respect Maurice Grosse hugely, I'm sure he wouldn't have made anything up. I'd have to be very sceptical about levitating.
To repeat what Sir William Crookes said in about 1860, I never said it was possible, I said it was true. And the position is the same today. We just got to redefine what we think is possible.
With Janet having taken the first steps towards womanhood, the phenomenon surrounding her became even more dramatic and terrifying.
Janet was being used.
Janet started to speak with this odd voice.
The discarnate entity was actually using Janet to speak.
Come on, my name's Morris. Let me hear you say it.
Maddox. Maddox. Maddox.
As the phenomena surrounding Janet increased in its severity, this voice was heard, seemingly coming from the 12-year-old girl.
Maddox.
It became more shocking once Janet started to speak with this odd voice.
This extraordinary bass male voice would come out of Janet at the age of 12. We did some quite careful study. The first thing we did was to get in a local speech therapist who heard it and said she had absolutely no explanation, and she was totally freaked out and she just didn't know what to make of it.
Why don't you go and live up where you belong instead?
I don't believe in that.
You don't believe in it? Why?
I'm not a heaven man.
A very senior professor from Birkbeck College who specialized in laryngology, study of throats, and he kindly lent us a very high-tech laryngograph where we managed to make a chart recording of this voice and show it to him. And he took one look at it and he said, "Oh yes, plica ventricularis." And in common language that means the false vocal folds.
Folds of membrane which sit behind the true vocal cords, the false vocal cords, are of limited use in normal vocalization.
We got an enormous variety of stuff ranging from absolute rubbish to rather disgusting obscenity to what sounded like very much like genuine messages from people who were lost and confused and didn't know where they were.
I'm not a heaven man.
There were claims from some that Janet was utilising a form of ventriloquism to create this voice, so a professional was called in, to the surprise of the Hodgsons, to test out this theory.
Ray Allen, the TV ventriloquist, was brought along to sort of say, well, that sort of tone of voice couldn't come from a girl of her age.
George came up to me and said that they've got a ventriloquist involved, and I threw my hands up in horror. I was totally opposed to that and wouldn't have anything to do with it.
You can completely rule ventriloquism out, mainly because that also involves our normal vocal cord.